Good evening, and welcome to Soluble, America's Political Central. The subject of our broadcast today, on this day, Monday, April the 24th, in the year of our Lord 2023, we're going to be talking about all things political and get into a deep dive of what is the new normal, if you will. Now, we know that, things that are going on today, the president is getting ready to announce a rerun, or that he will run for re-election for another 4 years. The Republican candidates are also, fastly declaring their candidacy. We have Asa Hutchinson, along with, formerly declared Governor Haley. Senator Scott is throwing his hat into the race. Of course, we already got Governor DeSantis here in Florida. So we're things are really starting to heat up, and it's time to choose sides, if you will. Looking at policy, how it's going to affect you, as an American voter, as an American citizen, and align yourself with your camp, so to speak. We have, still discussions about guns to deal with. We have discussions about the economy still, to deal with. The budget showdown is fastly approaching, as far as for the debt ceiling. Now, it's real interesting about this debt ceiling showdown that's looming. Now, as I've said early on, and it's important for us as Democratic voters to understand this. They want President Biden to roll back some of his policies. And of course, this is America, so it's up for debate. And we're not trying to exert any undue influence over any American voter, whether it be Democrat or Republican. Our goal here at Soluble, our job here at Soluble, is to lay out all the facts and let you decide. But laying out the facts with no spin, no strings attached, if you will. All the cards on the table. That's our goal here. That's our mission, because you can only make an informed decision when you have all that, when you have all the facts laid out before you. And so, there's no spin. There's no dodging the question. We're going to give it to you straight. And, we feel like here in America, politics has fastly gone downhill. And, that's not to say it's either party, it's both parties. It takes two to tango. Now, the Democrats haven't come out and did anything as egregious, as corrupt, as far as trying to unjustly influence elections. They haven't, ran an administration with rogue, leaders, as far as acting administrators, instead of verifiable security clearance referenced representatives in the administration. They haven't, tried to bribe foreign officials or introduce blatant nepotism into the White House. But as I said, it takes two to tango, and, to the 90-something percentile, to the 90-something plus percentile, that is the Democratic voting people of color. You have choices to make. And as Democratic voters, and specifically, all Democratic voters, but to the 90-something plus percentile in particular, we don't have to agree with everything that the Republican Party has to offer, as you were. We don't have to agree with everything that the Democratic Party has to offer. That's the beautiful thing about America. If we take 90% of it and disregard the other 10%, then that's fine. That doesn't make you a bad Democrat. Some of these things are faith-based, And we know that here at Soluble, we can only go so far in that regard. And I'm pretty sure that there are a lot more Democratic voters, people of color, that not part of that 90 something plus percentile, that feel the same way. And so it's important to know that, so as you don't feel pressure. You don't feel as if I can't go along with that, so I'm going to go to the Republican Party, or I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to vote from the right. Let me be clear once again to that 90 something percentile, people of color who are voting Democratic. You don't have to agree. Again, I say you don't have to fully support everything that the Democratic Party supports or backs. A 90%, 80% of approval of the things that the Democratic Party stand for. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you a bad Democrat. So it's important that the Democratic voters know that, because we could be losing voters here coming up to the election. And we're coming to a time in America, with culture wars and things like that. It's easy to get confused as far as where is or what is the right side of history to be on here. It's easy to get confused. So, to cut out all the confusion, you look at both parties, and as I said, you don't have to agree with everything. Excuse me. You don't have to agree with everything from either party. And that's what we try to offer here at Soluble, the beauty of finding solutions. It's up to the American people to decide. We just, strive to put it out there as we see it, to better inform, to, make you more aware of what's going on around you. Now, as I said, the president is getting ready to declare another run, another 4 years. Now, here's a question that, we have to ask ourselves as Democrats. It hasn't been quite 4 years, but of course it will be when the next election is up. So the question is, how could President Biden be a great man for the job 4 years ago, and he's brought America back, from social unrest, a stable economy, doing everything he can to fine tune it, to make it where the American people can still see hope for a piece of the American pie, if not the whole pie. This is post-pandemic now. We got to keep in mind, supply chains are just getting back to normal. Some people haven't returned to the office to work. Some are not returning. So this is post-pandemic. The economy is humming along fine. We formed a coalition. We formed a coalition of forces to rally behind or rally with America against, what's going on in Ukraine. So we have sound foreign policy there. China is very hesitant. They're watching, and they may leap, but right now they can only look. And what they're looking at is the great job that President Biden is doing, forming this coalition and making it difficult for Russia and Ukraine. So they think twice, 3 times about, possibly invading Taiwan. You want a president like that. That's what America needs. Someone who knows how to get things done without, isolating America, what's best for America's interest, here at home and overseas. The president has formed a coalition of the willing. And so, as I said, block out all the white noise that you're hearing, all the static that you're hearing. And, ask yourself the question, as I said, if President Biden was good enough in 2020, what's happened in 4 years for our guy, the guy we sent to Washington as commander-in-chief? And as I said now, this is something that, a president that we have in office now who's fast approaching 80, he knows what he's up against. You know, just as I've said before, climbing the steps on Air Force One to go up and down them constantly. He knows, just that alone is a task. It's what's required of the commander in chief. And so, forget, foreign policy, get what's going on in America, forget all this experience that he has as senator, as a politician for all these years. Because one thing we're focusing on here is age, cognitive ability, if you will, the ability to remember, the ability to articulate things in the correct way, without a lot of stuttering or forgetfulness, showing weakness, on the world stage from American commander in chief. So we get it. We get it. We don't want that. It's not a good look for America. So, as I said, the president knows. The president knows what he's up against. And, what we here at Soluble would like to emphasize is that, as I said, a president approaching 80, sensible people at that age, you've grown wise by now. At that age, approaching that age. So sensible people know when it's time to let it go. This is not like, some athlete who is in his, golden years, approaching retirement, and, he's still trying to compete. He's still trying to fight it out, and tough it out. He can still go against some of the youngest raging bulls in the sport. We understand that, that's the heart of a champion, but this is nothing like that. We're talking about, President of the United States in America, leader of the free world, the most powerful man in the world. And, we have to give the president the benefit of the doubt simply because of the great job he's done to resurrect the country, to come in and save the country from what was a MAGA movement that was taking America to the brink of social unrest, if not civil war. We have to give him credit for that alone. And as I said, 2019, somewhere along in there leading up to the election, he couldn't catch a break. He couldn't catch a break. He tried to go to sleep at night. He kissed Dr. Jill Biden goodnight, his wife, and there's the phone ringing. There's the beeper going off. Excuse me. There's the text going off. He couldn't rest. And, I'm pretty sure that the last person that he talked it over with was Dr. Biden, his wife. And, she gave the green light because she's the first lady. She's going to have to fulfill that role. There's work to be done there for her also. And so, in closing and moving on from this, we need to put this issue to bed. We really need to put this issue to bed. If the president decides that he wants to seek another term, we have to rest assured that in counsel with his wife and in counsel with his other family members and some of his leading, advisors, he's been well informed. He's been well schooled. And, if he has their support, then he should have base Democratic voter support here in America. There's nothing to see here that the president hasn't already showed us. And, if there is something, I'm quite sure he'll tell us. I'm quite sure that, he will tell us. Now, digging into touching bases on, this new normal. This new normal. Now, how do we want to distinguish what's best, as far as what's normal and say, well, this is not good. All of a sudden, this is not good enough. So let's create a new normal. Kind of like, something like alternative facts. C. Kellyanne Conway. The new normal. Now, as we stated in past podcasts, we can have, good new normals, or we can have bad new normals. Now, one new normal that we know is good from, a Democratic standpoint. And, what we think here at Soluble is what's good for America from an American standpoint. We have power sharing going on. Real power sharing, actual power sharing going on for the first time in the history of America, where Negroes have rose to a certain level of prominence, and they're not being so much governed as they are jointly governing with their fellow Americans. So this is a good new normal. But to keep it up, what do you do? What do you do to keep it up? You have to rock the vote each and every time. There's coming up to future elections, there's going to be some, bad stuff said. They're going to try to paint a bad picture, about any politician with a D beside his name. Now, you notice that when it comes to oftentimes in the election, Republicans are mudslingers. Democratic candidates, on the other hand, they're looking at the record. They're looking at the Republican candidate's record, and they're attacking him on the record. That's all fair. That's all good. We don't want to, have a candidate where, we got to resort to mudslinging. Because anytime, as Democratic voters, as a Democratic Party, that we have to resort to mudslinging, we're losing. We're having to go down in the mire, and that's like looking for something, looking to gain an edge, looking to smear, if you will, or say anything that it takes, to get yourself elected. And it leaves such a bad taste in the mouths of the American people, and understandably so. So, that's something to keep in mind. If we see Democratic candidates doing it, we have to call them out on it if we're going to be the bigger party, if we're going to remain on the right side of history. So, with that being said, we have to keep in mind what a former First Lady said, and Michelle Obama: when they go low, we go high, in that regard, but that's all they know. It's well written into the Republican playbook. As I said, they're gonna create smear. They're gonna try to sling mud. Rarely do they attack on the record. Just look at, former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, for example. The emails. It was, what about Hillary's record? What about her record? They couldn't attack her on it. They couldn't go after her for a record because they know that it was popular all across the American public. So they, was successfully, somewhat successfully able to label her as crooked. And, we know where that came from a man who, walks around with an army of lawyers calling, other candidates crooked. Be careful of throwing stones when you live in a glass house. But this is it, name calling, labeling. We got it out there right now. The woke mob. The woke mob. There you go. Classic labeling, classic name calling. And they only do it to stir up fear. That's the purpose of it, to stir up fear. Let's don't, drag ourselves down into it as Democratic candidates, as Democratic voters, paying attention to commercials. And, it's going to be up to us as the American voters. We are the people. So if we call it out, then it will cease to exist. Whether, those on the right call it out or not. We see that there was a major change at Fox News today. And this is big breaking news coming on the heels of the payout to Dominion. 1 week is paying $780 something million. The next week is firing, the top leading host in the nighttime lineup, in Tucker Carlson. Now, maybe Tucker would like to come over to Solid and partner up with us, and give us that hard right point of view. We welcome it. We welcome the challenge. We welcome the debate. But, all these things are evidence of where Republican principles, values, ability to be honest, it's on shaky ground. And, you have to ask yourself, do we want to be led by that kind of a party? Because if the party and the candidate or the nominee is on shaky ground, where is that going to put America? If you have a candidate, if you have an elected official who's been elected to the highest office in the land, And the whole candidacy, the whole presidency is based on alternative facts, outright lies, false innuendo. That's shaky ground for American politics. So, as I said, if the new commander in chief, God forbid, is coming, is moving on shaky ground, then that puts all of us as a country and people on what? Shaky ground. On shaky ground. So, it's voter beware. It's voter beware. But those are, two serious things to look at, because we want validity. We want things that are valid, truthful. We want facts that we can see bearing out with our own eyes, or we can hear them being played out, through our own ears. But those are, two big deals with the Republican Party, and it really, forces them to take this unnecessary hit by what? Panhandling the president's false rumors, spreading lies about the election. And, those on the right, credit to them, whether it's Fox viewers, Fox executives, they're tired of it. They're fed up. We don't know if, Tucker Carlson is going to be the extent of the house cleaning, but that's what it is, They're tired. They're fed up. And so it's a credibility hit. And we as, Americans, whether you're Republican or Democrat, you have to breathe a sigh of relief here and say, thank God we dodged a bullet when Mr. Murdoch finally did the right thing. Now, I'm pretty sure that, there's going to be a new normal there. Once again, a good new normal. If the new normal is a nighttime host that is not Tucker Carlson, that's a good new normal. That's a good new normal. And, we as Democrats, we're winning because we're pushing back against false claims. The evidence is there. The Supreme Court can't even go with it. The head of the DOJ, the Attorney General, can't even go against it. It's indisputable. Now, what we also have to know and realize, and lest we forget, is that, this same former president is the leading contender right now. And this is going to get real interesting starting in August. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's when the debates begin. It's gonna start to get real interesting towards the end of this year. So we really need to pay attention. And as I said, the first piece of legislation, all important for the sake of the country. All this is important for the sake of the country. The first piece of legislation that a new House majority Republicans come out with is something to stop the IRS. The first piece of legislation is to protect, help, or aid millionaires and billionaires. And we don't know how many, Republican voters fall in that category. But it's safe to say that it's not nowhere near close to the majority of them. So that's something for Republican voters to think about, and Democratic voters as well. Because as the president has said, everyone needs to pay their fair share. And so, when we get a Republican in office who doesn't push that same agenda, and, millionaires and billionaires are let off the hook, falling through loopholes, doing all kinds of things to get out of paying their fair share, America loses then. That does nothing to help the deficit. That does nothing for parks, roads, maybe aid to seniors. Something going back towards Social Security and Medicare, with everyone paying their fair share. And, it begs the question, from Republican voters alone, we will ask you to push the issue with your party leaders, with Republican officials. What is the problem with everyone paying their fair share? Now, when I get to be a millionaire, I would definitely give something back. I would definitely give back. Once your family is taken care of, I'm pretty sure that I'll be able to look at, what's left. if it's tens of thousands, but I will be able to give something back. And we don't begrudge, millionaires and billionaires for what they've earned. We don't begrudge them at all. But paying your fair share, what is the big deal here? These guys got, one private island in the South Pacific. Then they're looking for another one in the North Atlantic. And they need yachts docked at each one of them. But it's not enough. They found another one. It's not enough. They found another private island that they want to purchase. I mean, what gives? But we don't begrudge that, as I said. But what we as Democrats, we have to remember and ask ourselves, lest we forget, could this money that's there to buy extra islands or extra yachts, could that be that fair share that they avoid paying in taxes? And the Republicans are right here, officials, leading officials and politicians to protect them. So we're speaking to Republican voters now, to say, tell us what the problem is with paying your fair share. We understand the pro-life position. We understand the small government position. Even if we don't agree with any of these things, we understand it. But as Democrats in the country, we would be less than patriotic. We would be, below our civic responsibility if we're not asking the question, why not pay your fair share? Why not pay your fair share? The Republican politicians are not going to, go there. Or thus far they haven't. And between now and the next election, we don't see any difference. This was something that the president announced way before the midterms that just left us. He'd been announced, beefing up the IRS, because they had antiquated machines. They needed more staffing to process taxes faster. Go after tax dodgers. He'd been announced it before the midterm. But you never heard the Republicans You never heard the Republicans campaign on it. You never heard them before the midterms campaign on this. It was about the border, the price of bread and milk. The president is spending too much money. This and that. It's all when it comes to the Democrats, they're spending too much. But when it comes to these millionaires and billionaires who are Republican voters, everything is fine. They're not doing nothing wrong here. And so in the process of the spin, as the world turns, you can't get dizzy here. You can't get sidetracked. We're going to lay it all out. And, you will have to make the determination. But as I said, before the midterms, this was never a big deal. We never heard anything about, first and foremost, we got to deal with this crisis that the president has created by, boosting funding for the IRS. It's like a sneak attack from the rear. And Republican voters should feel the same way. As I said, pro-life, let's talk about it. Second Amendment rights, let's talk about it. Small government, and more power to the states. We understand it. Let's talk about it. But here we have what we believe in America is a fair and equal tax system. Of course, some pay more. Of course, some pay less. Some with children get benefit that others with children don't have. But, at the end of all that, what's wrong with everyone? Not just millionaires and billionaires. What's wrong with everyone paying their fair share? And that's a talking point here at Soluble. We have to keep it in mind. Now, if the president doesn't get the support that he needs coming up to the 2024 election, this could definitely turn back the hands of time. And then, we're a poor nation because of it. We're worse off because of, the millionaires and billionaires who are ducking their responsibility. So, the vote is important. And remember, like I said, the new normal that we're in, and this is to all Democratic voters, the 90-something plus percentile people of color in particular. We're power sharing now. We're power sharing. So, as I said, to Negroes all across America, no matter what political stripe, there's finger pointing is a thing of the past. If things are not going well with you, or you feel like they're not going well with the people as a whole, as a race, then it's not because of Caucasian dominance or oppression. If you feel that way, it very well simply could be that you're not participating in the process. You're not getting involved. You're not voting. You're not calling. You're not writing. You're not getting out and campaigning for one of the Democratic candidates. And I'll say it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. Is the Democratic Party the perfect party for those 90-something% people of color that vote Democrat in America? No, they're not the perfect party. But they're the party that works for us. They're the party that works best for us. And so you have the power here, the potential. If you apply yourselves, that's real important to note. Now, if you apply yourself to go from the have-nots to, the haves, or to go from the have-nots to taking those fast steps of progression towards the haves. And, that's just it. There's no excuses now. You're power sharing, take advantage of it. I gave you examples, the Justins of Tennessee, of the Tennessee State House. They got kicked out for bogus reasons, for, something they should have been at the most censored for. But they expelled them, they kicked them out. But what happened? They had to let them back in. That's just one case in point example. So, we have to look at the new normal. What's good about the new normal and what's bad? Some new normals are good. Some new normals will never work for America. Case in point, new normals that wasn't going to work for America. Now, the president, we know what the former president stirred up with his MAGA rhetoric, his dog whistles. So the new normal before, that was bad. And that you don't seem to see a lot of now. Where are the Karen cases? Entitled Caucasian women calling the police on little kids for selling lemonade or water in the neighborhood. Calling the police on Negroes in America who happen to live at in an affluent neighborhood, in an expensive apartment complex. Calling the police on Negroes in America who are just simply barbecuing at the park. This became a new normal under the last active administration, the Trump administration. Neo-Nazis, Muslim bans, security clearance violations, acting administrators. These were new normals that were not good for America. And to keep them out of the picture, to keep them from ever ceasing to attempting to exist again, we have to what? Always go out and rock the vote. Go out and rock the vote. Now, oftentimes the prevailing thought is that, especially among people of color here in the country, what's the point? They're going to do, what they want to do. Vote and see. That's the best that we can give you here at Salisbury is the vote and see. Because while you're skeptical, You don't have the faith there. You feel like it's not worth it. Look at the past. Let's just say the last 12 years of what we've had. We had an Obama, we had a Trump, and now we're here at Biden. And we know that this new normal, Karen cases, neo-Nazis, things like Muslim bans. We know this was all under, the former administration. And it was a new normal that we voted out. And so now we're back to more of American norms that we're used to, seeing. A Muslim ban alone. Can you imagine, how much money we would be losing as a country? With people flying in here, we have some of the best law enforcement in the world, whether it's domestic or foreign and abroad. We have the best of the best, and you would think that the former president would say, okay, we're not going to have this Muslim ban because we can lose money as a country. Think about it with smarts. But now, if you're going to attempt to come into the country and commit a terrorist attack, watch our elite law enforcement. That's where we should be at as a country. We shouldn't be afraid to let any nationality or, people from countries of different origin into America, because we have law enforcement that is on the ready. And, if we try to do something like institute a Muslim ban, what that is a sign of weakness, from countries overseas that look at America as being that land of immigrants since the beginning. It's a sign of weakness. But, this is what was a new normal under the previous administration. New normal, good or bad. Some can be good, some can be bad. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out or distinguish between, which is which. And so, with 2024 fast approaching, let's make ourselves aware of policy. Let's make ourselves aware of who, as individuals or who, as party, is doing what's best for America. And not just a chosen few, but all of America. Now, we have the two sticking points there for that 90-something plus percentile people of color who are voting in the Democratic Party. And that is entitlements. And we went into deep discussion about this. Something that was started under Franklin Roosevelt during the Great Depression. And from then to now, what is done. We've been in deep discussion about it, and we will continue to take a deep dive in it. Also, we know that as far as that 90-something percentile, we could be on shaky ground as far as getting the turnout and getting support as Democrats when it comes to the LGBTQ community. Now, as I said before here at Soluble, we can go no farther on this particular issue than our faith will let us go. And at the same time, as I said, as Democratic voters, we don't have to agree with 100% of everything that the Democratic Party stands for. That's the American way. That's not to say that, you're a bad American or you're no longer a patriot or you're not a good Democrat. We're Democrats. Regardless of the adjective used to describe what kind we are, we're Democrats. And in America, you have the freedom to join or not join, to support or not support. So it's really nothing to run away from when it comes to the LGBTQ issue. Our position here is they should have protections under the Constitution, from gay bashings, discrimination from, restaurants, movie theaters, clubs, or whatever. They should have protection from that, for being attacked, from being assaulted. And, that's where we draw the line. But at the same time, every Democratic voter has to make up their own mind. But lest we forget, and we're thankful for it. This is one of the beauties about living in America. We don't have to agree with everything. that the Democratic Party supports. And that makes you a better Democrat for doing that. You're practicing the American way. So, don't forget that. Let's not feel pressure to cave or that it's best to switch. Our faith does not take us to, assaulting, beating people because they think different, they dress different, they act different. Our faith does not lead us to that. The word of God tells us to admonish him. Don't count him as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother. And, we think that's a good Democrat thing to do as far as faith-based and where your faith takes you. Count him not as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother. And that's as far as we can go. And that makes you a good Democrat. That makes you a good Democrat. Now, mass shootings, in closing. New normal. This is a new normal that can be, well, excuse me, not it can be. We know that it's terrible for America. It's bad for America. For mass shooting to be the new normal. Now, not to, inject politics in it, but that's where it's going to be solved in the end with a vote. Now, we know where the right stands on assault weapons ban. And then at the same time, they're telling us that we have a mental health crisis in the country. And that's where, a lot of the mass shootings stem from. But what we here at Soluble believe is that, it's real disappointing that none of these geniuses on the right has taken time to think that, okay, we have a mental health crisis in this country. Well, if that's so, how will more mass shootings solve it? Mass shootings, for all we know, could be creating a mental health crisis. Unless you're trying to tell us, as American voters, Democrat or Republican, that, when there's a mass shooting and 15, 10 plus people are killed, it does nothing it doesn't affect the mental psyche of American citizens. It does. So our position here is Soluble, and, we put this out there for the Democratic voters to really think about, because the Republicans want to have it both ways. They want to have their assault weapons, and they want to point the finger at mental illness. Again, I say, they want to have their assault weapons, and then they want to point the finger at mental illness. That's like me, standing in my front yard with a garden hose, and, I'm using it as a sprinkler, and, I'm pointing the finger at the fact that water is falling on my head. Well, if I put the hose down, maybe the water will stop falling on my head. If we ban assault weapons in this country, it would do a lot to help the mental health crisis that we have in the country. And so that's where you have to, read between the lines, try to see around or through the smoke and mirrors, if you will. Here we have a party that's saying that, it's not an assault weapons crisis. It's a mental health crisis. Can you have one without the other? Can you have a mental health crisis without assault weapons? Can you have assault weapons being used all over the country to kill America and not have a mental health crisis? So don't get it twisted. It's not one and the same. It's not one and the same. If you look at one, you have to look at both of them. Here I have a mental health crisis in my community, in my family. I have a family of 12. We all have weapons. 6 of us have been killed. So I have to make a decision now. Is it because of the mental health crisis that 6 of us have been killed? Or is it because of the guns that 6 of us have been killed? And if 6 of us of the 12 family members have been killed, what's left for the other 6? They have the best, they still have the best mental health. They haven't been affected by the 6 that have died tragically in mass shooting. So, we have to, going forward into 2024, show Republican politicians that we're more intelligent than this, that we see through it. We're appealing to our Republican voters on the other side to wake up to this. It's just an excuse. And, if there is a mental health crisis in the country that's plaguing the country, what is the plan for it? What have we seen come out of the House? The Republicans have the majority now. They can draft legislation in the Senate. Whether it makes it to the floor for a vote or not, we don't know. But I'm quite sure that it will if it has to do with protecting Americans from gun violence, from assault weapons. So we're waiting with bated breath, to see what those on the right will do to reach out across the aisles, if you will, for, common sense gun legislation. And that's a talking point for, the new normal. Some are bad and some are good. We know that the new normal that was brought upon America during the MAGA years, most of those new normals were not good for America. We can't let the new normal be that, every time there's an election, then there are question marks. There are people pointing fingers, making false accusations, threats of violence. The Republic cannot survive. There's no way the Republic can survive in that type of new normal. A new normal of the outgoing commander-in-chief not calling and conceding and congratulating and throwing their support behind, for the sake of America, the new incoming president. For the first time in American history, we lack a smooth transition of power. Why? Now, America's never been a country to let, one person be above the law. America has never, in its 240-something odd years of existence, never let ego taint the process or tear down the process. No one's above the Constitution as citizens. No one's above it. And so we've never had this where, there was time for a peaceful transfer of power, and we had such a sore loser that, faith in democracy around the world was shaken because of one man's ego. That's a new normal that we can't let happen. We can't let it happen. Even though it's not the best look, I think that, most Americans can agree with us here at Soluble. We like it when you see a president in office 4 to 8 years and how they've aged. We see what Obama was like: young, vital, no grays president. And then after 8 years, we saw the age of showing how much, a president cares, how much they're losing sleep at night. They're worried if, what they're doing is best, not just for the Democrats who put them in office or the Republican voters who put them in the Oval Office. They're worried. They're concerned. They're staying up late at night. They're getting up early. Sometimes they're moving on 2 or 3 hours of sleep. And so you see, after 4 to 8 years, you see the aging process. You see what being president of the United States, commander-in-chief, leader of the free world, you see what it can do when you care, when you're concerned, when you're doing everything you can to protect and defend the Republic from all enemies, foreign and domestic. We see the wear. What do we see here on the last former president? He's only concerned about his tan, his hair flipped to the side, his appearance. There's very little aging that seems to, be reflected in his worried about us as citizens. He doesn't seem to be worrying about us as a country, as a nation, our standing, where we're at with foreign policy, where we're at up against foreign powers who are looking to destroy America or bring it down. We don't see it. So that should tell us a lot about, the former commander in chief. No aging. No aging. No signs of aging. What does that tell you? What's going on late at night? McDonald's and Cokes, Kentucky Fried Chicken and Cokes, and passing out with no concern, no empathy, not a care in the world for American citizens. This is the first time in a long time where we've seen this. Most presidents, up until the former president there, and let's keep this in mind, they have aged. They go in for 8 years, and it looks like they've aged 10 to 15 years. That's a president, that's a commander-in-chief who cares, who's concerned. As I said, losing sleep, staying up late at night. Care, concern. So some new normals are good. Some new normals are not good. They're bad for the country. And, we have to determine which is which. We the people. And then more important, we have to show up on election day. Here it is. Here it is laid out for you. Important note to keep in mind. As I said, most presidents in my lifetime, I have seen them age. Whether it's a one term or whether it's two, they age because of the weight of the job. And here you see the former President Trump. He goes in a pretty boy, he comes out a pretty boy. When you look at him, where do you see where, there's wear and tear? There's worryation or concern for you. And it's a normal thing because presidents preside, they perform the duty of a commander-in-chief with love for country. And with love for country and its citizens comes, those responsibilities. And those responsibilities bring worryation, frustration, lack of sleep. You haven't seen it. You haven't seen it. So that's really something to think about. That's the new normal. A Republican president who goes in as a pretty boy, with a golden tan, a hair flip, $100, $1,000 suits on, egomaniacal. Is this the kind of new normal that we want in our leader? And if not, you know what you have to do in 2024. New normal. Bad or good. Former President Carter, former President Jimmy Carter, he's in hospice right now. Now, we know that when the president was in office, and even since he's left office, when things happen like deaths, funerals and things of that nature where all presidents come together because of the death of another president, or, a high-ranking official in government, could be a senator, could be a Supreme Court justice, but when these high-ranking officials die, the majority of the times, the president or the former presidents are coming out. They're all together, conversing, sitting there in mourning or grieving during the grieving process. They may take pictures afterwards. Where is the former president being in all this? He wants to be in a class by himself. Is he too good to congregate, to converse with the other former presidents? This new normal is not good. This new normal is not good. And that's our position here at Soluble. But, as I said, we're not here to convince, arm twist, forcefully persuade. We put the facts out there as we know them. And that is a fact. No signs of aging on this former president. President Biden is in. He's approaching 80. He's taking the lumps. As a matter of fact, the American people, may be overly concerned about his age. But just keep in mind, he's not. And if he's not, we should trust him on whatever he says. We trusted him in 2020. He's getting the job done. He came in, dealing with a pandemic, um, stagnant wages, recessions looming, inflation looming. And the president has done everything he could to turn the right buttons, talk to the right people, and make the decisions that where what should be most important for us as American citizens is to let the decisions that he make and the moves that he make and the people that he talked to give us at the end of the day the best opportunity after all is said and done to have a shot at that piece of the American pie. It could be one slice, it could be two slices. It could be the one slice of a person with tens of thousands of dollars saved. It could be 2 to 3 slices with a person with hundreds of thousands of dollars saved. But, as a Democratic president, he's given us that chance. He's made it where, we can hope and believe again. We can hope and believe again. Now, is the job done? Is the work complete? No. We still have more work to do. As I said in closing, we have, the debt limit coming up, the debt ceiling, raising it, adding money, or however the process goes. And we see the cuts. We're going to, as the situation approaches, we're going to give it to you in detail. The cuts that the Republican House is asking before they sign on to raising the debt ceiling. And as we speak, some of the debt that's there is debt that was occurred under the former administration. What was the first thing the former president did when he came into office? Give a tax break to the wealthy, add to the deficit. Boom. There you go. So, like as I said in closing, some new normals are good, some new normals are bad. Now, let's not forget, it's we the people. We're power sharing now to Democratic voters, to the Democratic Party. We're power sharing. And, that goes out to that 90-something plus percentile, people of color. And, let's be clear here at Soluble. We would be, not up to par with what is our responsibility if we don't, focus on charity first, which is love for one's fellow man. So we go to the people of color, the ones who are threatened with the most disenfranchisement, the ones most likely to be discriminated against. We go there first. But because we are a podcast of humanity, we're concerned about all Americans. Please don't forget that. Don't get it twisted. This is not just for the 90-something plus percentile. But first and foremost is to them. To, take the blinders off and see that, it's better in America when we don't have to, finger point or move past the blame game. And that's where we're at now. We've informed you of it. We're power sharing. Believe it or not. Know it or not. Now, whether you vote, call your local politicians and fuss and cuss, when they come into their districts, whether you as constituents go out to meet them and ask questions, that's going to be on you. But if you don't in this power sharing era, then you could easily lose power. And even if that happens where you lose power, there can't be finger pointing. There's no more blame game. There's no more, they're doing this. This is happening because I'm black. It's over. We had Obama in, and even though the MAGA movement under former President Trump tried to come back and turn back the hands of time, we got him out in 4 years before the damage could be done or cemented, before he can really turn back the hands of time, to a MAGA era where, it was called all Caucasian first and everybody else, immigrants, so-called minorities, they get the scraps or good luck with achieving the American dream. We've moved past it now. So that is, somewhat of a short discussion concerning the new normal. It could be a new normal that's bad. It could be a new normal of good. We've gave you examples of both. Alternative facts is a bad new normal for America. Alternative facts is a bad new normal for America. Fox News coming clean, even though they didn't admit their wrongs. Find one of the leading corrupt hosts, racist hosts, divisive for American hosts. That's a new normal that's good. Let's hope. It remains to be seen, who's going to replace Tucker. But these are examples of the new normal, whether it be bad or good. And you have to know that if you don't show up for the vote, then the new normal is more than likely going to be bad, because the former president right now is, by all appearances, looks to be the leading candidate for the Republican nomination for president of the United States. But as I said, let's still take a watch and see approach. We're a long ways from August. We're a long ways from the Iowa caucuses, which begin early next year. And so, while we take the wait and see approach as Democratic voters, we still have to push. We still have to push. We have to stay alert and be ready. Pushing, our message, getting the word out to the people, showing them, through visual evidence how the Democratic Party is the party that's best suited to lead all. And we put, a lot of emphasis on that word, all Americans, towards a piece of the pie, and not just, the 1% of millionaires and billionaires. So that's going to conclude our podcast for the night as far as a new normal. We hope that we've been informative. We're always welcoming opposing points of view. We don't, claim to have all the answers here. We're out to solve. But, we realize that there could be an opposing point of view out there, an opposing opinion that could shed more light on the subject. There could be an opposing point of view out there that brings us closer to that solution than what Soluble has. We acknowledge that. We recognize that. But we do, we make the best attempt as we can to, keep you informed, whether you're on the right or the left. And that's tonight's podcast. We thank you for joining us. We hope that, you stay safe out here in these turbulent, uncertain times. We know that rocking the vote can really change a lot of this by putting, more people in positions who are against assault weapon, and knowing at the same time that it doesn't threaten the Second Amendment. So, let's stay alert, alert on policy, what the candidates are saying and doing, even getting a feel for, what's going on around you locally, because we know that all politics are local. So until we meet again, this is Soluble signing off, saying good night and God bless. Thank you for joining us.